So, today I want to talk about labor rights and heat exposure. For workers whose jobs are performed outside, extreme weather has always been a part of the job. Whether one delivers packages, works construction, does farm work, or does any of the other millions of jobs that require one to be consistently exposed to summer heat, there has always been a potential danger to workers' lives. With that said, as global temperatures rise due to climate change, this problem is becoming a lot worse. As we've seen this summer alone, record temperatures have been set pretty much all across the United States, as well as other parts of the world. And given the nature of a lot of these jobs, there's little to no relief from the heat, and in most cases, companies don't care about their workers' lives, especially if it would mean less profit. I mean, the fact is, we already know that the consequences of extreme heat can be severe. A recent NPR Columbia Journalism School investigation found that at least 384 workers have died from environmental heat exposure in just the last decade. And the problem is getting worse. The 3 year average of worker heat deaths has doubled since the early 1990s. And, the fact remains that this number is also likely very low, as a lot of agricultural jobs, for example, do not have protocols for reporting those who die due to heat related illness. And this also isn't counting the thousands upon thousands of workers who will also get short and long term illnesses from constant heat exposure due to a lot of these dangerous conditions. The last 7 years have been the hottest on record, said the senior climate scientist and author of the UCS. Without additional protections, the risks to workers will only grow in the decades ahead as climate change worsens, leaving roughly 32 million outdoor workers in our country to face a brutal choice: their health or their jobs. Lost wages from extreme heat are projected to amount to more than $55 billion annually, says NPR. And so that's really another key component that needs to be looked at with all of this. When we examine the fact that people are going to get sick from these jobs, they also lose time at their jobs, and they're often not covered for these illnesses. In addition, a lot of people are put in the same place that a lot of other workers from different backgrounds are put into, which is they have the choice to continue these very dangerous jobs and to listen to their bosses in putting themselves in dangerous conditions, or deal with the consequences of not having enough money to pay for rent that month. And that's never a place that a person wants to be in, but if you're put in that place, you may put yourself in more dangerous and risky situations than otherwise one would have considered an acceptable condition. Now, the UCS reporting highlights the lack of federal worker protections as a major issue for worker safety. As NPR reported, at least a dozen companies have had multiple employees die from environmental heat exposure. OSHA has not adopted a national heat standard to safeguard workers and often decides to not penalize companies for worker deaths, because that's somehow reasonable. The companies can work these people literally to the point where they drop dead on the job and then they don't get in trouble for it. This is just the value of human life in this society. The report's authors call for a number of policy changes, including adapting worker schedules to coincide with cooler times of day and lessening overall workloads. Employers, the report says, should also implement mandatory heat safety plans, heat monitoring, and reporting requirements, as well as multilingual training for supervisors and workers to facilitate better and faster responses to dangers imposed by extreme heat. This is the cost of doing business. And this is what people should be investing in if they want to maintain their businesses. The fact is that under these current realities, there's no incentive for them to do that. Again, if somebody drops dead, they don't have to really deal with the repercussions of that, right? Like, there's no downside for them. And unfortunately, the language that most of these businesses speak is financial. And if they're not being financially hit, they're not going to really do much to change the policies, including allowing workers to work at cooler times of day. which should be fairly obvious because people would not only be, better at their job and safer, it would be more efficient and more money would probably be produced. But, that's capitalism and its inefficiencies for you. In the meantime, we do have states like California and Washington having adopted workplace rules to address heat exposure. Many other states have attempted to add protections, given that the federal government doesn't have a full plan for all of this. And the truth is that, of course, industry groups representing agricultural, construction, and other business interests have stepped into the public record to try to fight against these changes. They do not want new rules protecting workers because, of course, it would be too burdensome, too costly, too expensive to actually provide care for the people who do all the work for these companies. And just so we can see some examples, we have here that Jose Delgado, 73, a white-haired man who harvests sweet potatoes, said he'd been hospitalized with heat stroke twice in the past 5 years. Construction worker Andres Villegas, 57, said he has seen men with heat illness fall from rooftops and ladders. He has had his own close call a few times a few years ago. Farm workers, landscapers, and nursery workers said that their bosses don't provide water, which should be a basic requirement for working in the heat, or prohibit them from pausing their labor to take a drink, causing headaches, nausea, and dizziness. We're seeing temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We meet workers who tell us that their bosses don't give them even a 10 or 15-minute break. They know it's inhumane to work under those conditions, but they have bills to pay. And that's the reality that I was talking about earlier. Now, another thing that I would like to briefly go over is the effects of climate change have actually drastically increased the dangers of workers in these conditions. There's the fact that temperatures have increased, which already makes it more dangerous, but there's also another factor that needs to be taken into account. The higher temperatures, whenever we see higher average temperatures occurring, that means that more water vapor is able to be held in the atmosphere. And that means that it's much more difficult for workers to sweat and therefore cool down in these much hotter temperatures. So not only is the hotter temperature more dangerous, it actively makes it so that you can't sweat properly to cool yourself and therefore are going to be exposed to an even more dangerous heat condition than what was originally understood or would be understood based on our older understandings. These temperatures are hitting really dangerous levels and heat indexes are going through the roof. Of course, this is the business's response. One business representative commented that basically if we give them breaks, it costs us money. Well, yeah, that's the cost of doing business. That's the cost of running your company. If you don't want your workers to drop dead, but that's not the goal here, right? The goal isn't to protect workers. It's entirely to make as much money as possible. And that is the danger of producing things under an economic system like capitalism where financial incentives rule the day. So as another example, there was actually a 69-year-old person who had been taken to a morgue literally straight from their facility because they were found at their job by their family in the field where they had worked, pretty much just lying there, and was taken literally dead on arrival. And this is what we're seeing. And another person had said, it's easy to feel the high humidity and smoke from nearby wildfires. And your chest starts to feel really heavy, she said. Her father drove a tractor used for disking with no roof, which meant he was constantly exposed to the elements. And so people are literally dying from this heat. That's not to mention, like they said, the smoke from the nearby wildfires, which must be doing wonderful things for people's lungs, in addition to the high humidity that I mentioned before. And that's not even counting, firefighters who are actually fighting these massive forest fires, some of whom are prison employed and therefore getting practically no wages for doing this in these dangerous high temperatures and conditions with tons of heavy gear on. This is ridiculous. The level of just, not valuing human life that exists here. In the meantime, you have construction workers, like this one construction worker that was working on the roof of a school, baking in the blistering June sun as her crew rushed to get the building's air conditioner back up and running. She had not been able to take a break all day because of the pressure to finish her job, and she started to feel dizzy as the sun bounced off the sheet metal she was laying down. Can you imagine that? It's already like 100-degree weather, Fahrenheit, and then you have the sun reflecting off metal sheets that you're putting down so that children can have air condition and be comfortable in their school. And then on top of that, you're getting hit with this increased heat from these metal sheets that you're laying down. So like, I can't even imagine what temperature that must have felt like. She started to climb down off the roof and thought she was going to pass out and fall off the ladder. When she made it to her truck, her muscles were aching and she felt like her skin was burning. That kind of heat exhaustion is common for construction workers in Texas, where nearly 40% of whom say they are not given regular breaks on job sites, even in the heat of summer, according to surveys by the Workers' Defense Project. And there are other cases with UPS workers, like this case in Scottsdale, Arizona, where there's actually a video where a homeowner's doorbell camera picked up a UPS worker collapsing on the porch. This is the kind of thing that just should be a red flag that there's something wrong with our society. And a lot of people in Arizona and a lot of these very hot states, and when the temperatures are up, have been advocating for people leaving out coolers with water bottles in front of their homes with ice so that UPS workers, when they arrive at their homes, can just grab a bottle of water and cool off. And I'm sorry, it should be on the company to really provide that. And I'm not saying don't do a service to the workers that we need to take care of and see for the struggle that they're in, right? But at the same time, this is something the company should be providing, not just the kindness of people, especially when they are working for this company. Meanwhile, they took surface temperatures within some of the different trucks inside of the UPS trucks. And as the Teamsters for a Democratic Union mention here, there is no way that a CEO would ever accept working in 120 to 130 degree offices. And the fact remains that if your boss wouldn't work in the conditions that they're putting you in, then you shouldn't have to either. Safety regulations for extreme weather, especially heat, is likely to become a major union talking point in the near future, if it's not already being discussed in a lot of labor contracts as they're being written now. Now, finally, I do want to point out that there was one more case where one of the insides of the truck registered as 154.3 degrees Fahrenheit. This is ridiculous how hot that can get. Meanwhile, again, in 103-degree heat in Fort Worth, Texas, you had another driver who was sent to the emergency room and had to be given, IV bags and taken care of. Meanwhile, you have UPS workers gathering outside the company's Foster Avenue facility in Brooklyn to protest, and good, because they need to start working towards getting these conditions fixed. UPS is the largest package delivery company in the world, and after record earnings last year, the company installed cameras in all of its trucks, of course, to spy and monitor these workers, but didn't change its heat safety protocols, compounding long-held grievances about the company's priorities. Now, the Teamsters issued a public letter last week outlining a series of steps it says UPS should take immediately to improve the safety of its drivers given the weather. They included providing fans for every truck rather than by request. So just giving people fans. Apparently that's too difficult for UPS to do. One of the world's biggest package delivery company in the world, who is making record-breaking earnings every year. The other options were cooling neck towels, consistent supplies of water and ice, more breathable uniforms, and hiring more drivers in order to reduce workload during dangerous times. None of these are unreasonable demands or, desires by these workers, and they should be listened to. However, of course, UPS has said that its drivers are trained to work outdoors and manage the effects of hot weather, and that the company provides regular heat illness and injury prevention training for employees, as well as water and ice. Well, the union wouldn't be asking for it if they actually did. So, no, they're not. And as part of its Cool Solutions program, which that's just one of those corporate slogan words that just feels infuriating, that they developed with regulators. In the meantime, the company's trucks don't have air conditioning, and again, many are without fans. The warehouse floors and docks where the company's loaders work can also get dangerously hot, as I showed down below on this page. The company has also previously stated that it can't have air conditioning in its fleet of package trucks because frequent stops in the sides of vehicles would render air conditioning ineffective. The same goes for large warehouses with loading dock doors that are usually left open, which tells me that you need to reevaluate your system and change how things are done, because the fact remains that you need to keep your workers cool, because otherwise they're just going to drop on the job. And that doesn't even count for the fact that if a worker gets sick and they, are at the point where they're about to pass out, they're driving a vehicle, which could lead to other people dying. And these extreme temperatures are already dangerous enough as it is for people who do not have to perform labor in them. Whether it's construction, agricultural labor, package delivery, or any of the other numerous jobs that require one to work in these extreme temperatures. The workers who do these essential jobs deserve to be treated with respect and dignity and allowed to take breaks, cool down, drink water, and take cover from this extreme heat without penalty. It's not unreasonable that they should be able to change their hours to work at cooler times during the day. This shouldn't even need to be said. However, when profit motivations supersede human safety, you get industry representatives who are more worried about quarterly earnings than how many people died on the job today. These business owners do not care if workers live or die. So what we need is solidarity with our fellow workers out there, and recognition that in the upcoming struggles, safety regulations for extreme weather is going to not just be a union goal, but a necessity of doing business. So with that said, if you've enjoyed what you've watched here today, consider liking the video, subscribing, as well as leaving a comment, and do consider joining my Discord where we have conversations on topics like these. If you're in a financial place to do so, and only if you're in a financial place to do so, please do consider supporting me on Patreon, especially as political content like this can often be demonetized on YouTube. The links for everything that I mentioned are in the description down below. With that said, my name is Anarchist Tara, and I thank you so much for watching.